Hey guys, Midnight Monster here. Today we talk about the creepiest, most unexplained things that people have ever experienced. The first story we're going to look at today is one of my favorite creepiest stories I've ever read. If you've had any creepy, unexplained situations that you want to share, make sure you post in the comment section below, as well as subscribe to the channel. Let's get started with the first story of the day. My house sitting story. 2 months after my brother and his wife bought a new house, they had to go out of town and needed their cats fed. Their house and my offices are both a good drive from my apartment, but only a few minutes away from each other. My brother said if I wanted, I could just stay over in the guest room rather than driving among the 3 places. So, I got the keys and instructions. I was staying there 3 nights, Monday to Wednesday. Monday evening was an uneventful until about midnight. I was lying on the living room couch watching Conan, with a cat laying on my chest. I started to drift off to sleep, and the next thing I knew, I was standing in pitch black darkness. I completely freaked out. I had no idea where I was. I felt around in the dark and felt nothing. Finally, I realized there was a faint blue light coming from above. I moved toward it and then understood where I was. I was in the fucking basement. The light was coming through the basement door at the top of the stairs, which leads straight to the kitchen. Just enough moonlight made it through from a window elsewhere in the kitchen. I bolted up the stairs, turned on the kitchen light, and closed the basement door. I was terrified until I calmed down enough to come to the conclusion you probably just came down here sleepwalking down the stairs. After opening the basement door, which I knew was closed. A couple of things are important to the story. The first is the basement. The house was very nice, actually, more than they should have been able to afford. The only exception was that damn basement. I'd only seen the basement once when I first got the tour. It was unfinished and was one major thing that they wanted to fix up. All they had done there was some boxes and washer and dryer. I had no reason to want to go down there, but I had kind of forgotten it existed. The other point is that sleepwalking is kind of a thing in my family. Almost an inside joke. My brother talked in his sleep constantly and would sleepwalk sometimes, and it also scared the hell out of me. The idea of people doing things in their sleep just creeps me out to the core, and it still does. My brother knew this and would tease me about it, so it was known in my family that I had this phobia. But as far as I knew, I've never, ever sleepwalked until that night. The image kept playing in my mind over and over of me, asleep, getting up from the couch, walking to the kitchen, opening the basement door, and shuffling down the stairs into total darkness. Creepy as all hell. Anyways, I saw the TV was still on in the living room playing Wedding Crashers. I watched the rest of the movie trying to laugh and think of sleepwalking as a funny story to tell my brother. When I went upstairs to go get some sleep in the guest room, I stayed asleep. That was night 1. The next morning, in the light of day, it did not seem that scary. I texted my brother about it and joked around. All day I was not bothered one bit, but as I'm walking out from my office to my car, I'm overcome with this sense of dread. All of a sudden, the thought of going to sleep in that house and maybe sleepwalking again is starting to scare me. So, I had a plan. I stop at the hardware store and pick up one of those rubber doorstop wedges. At the house, I jam this into the crack under the basement door and kick it in until it's so far that it can't go any further. I test out trying to open the door, and I swear, it will not budge. Perfect. Later, I go upstairs and fall asleep. When I wake up, I swear to God I think I'm dreaming. I was standing in darkness again, but this time I know exactly where I am. The smell is the same, the concrete floor under my feet is the same. I look around for the light from the stairs. It takes me longer to find it because it's further away. Last night, I was only a couple of feet from the stairs. This night, it was maybe 10 feet. I run up and turn on the kitchen lights. I see the rubber wedge on the floor a couple feet away, as if tossed there. Again, I can't stop picturing myself sleepwalking. Out of the bedroom, down the stairs, trying to open the basement door. Bending down and yanking out that wedge. And then, again, slowly down into darkness. I decided I was turning on the basement lights and they were staying on. I opened the door and flipped the switch to the basement stairway. I saw there was a main switch at the bottom of the stairs. To give you guys a quick sense of the layout, the staircase splits the basement into two parts. To the right is a small area with a washer and dryer, and to the left is the big open area. Anyways, I walked down and turned on the lights for the whole basement. That's when I noticed something I have not noticed when my brother gave me a tour. About 10 to 15 feet away in the big area, there was a door to what looked like a small closet. This door was closed but had no doorknob, just an empty hole, so it looked like it would freely swing open. I realized it was very close to where I had just awoken. Then, a fucking freaky thought came to me. It was as if I, each night, was heading into that door and getting a little further each time before I woke up. As soon as that thought popped into my head, I booked it up those stairs again, leaving the lights on and closing the door. I went up to the bedroom, but it took me forever to fall asleep. That was night 2. The next morning, Wednesday morning, I woke up late for work. I did not think about the basement at all because I was scrambling to get ready. At work, though, I was still curious about what was behind that door. So, I texted my brother and asked. He replied, "Wait, why were you in the basement?" I realized that when I texted him the day before, I never actually told him where I woke up. So, I tell him I woke up in the basement, actually twice in a row. After a while, he sends this novel-length text about how the basement is creepy and not to go down there, etc. How they tried putting the litter boxes in the basement and the cats made a mess in the house because they refused to go down. How he volunteers to do every chore other than laundry so he doesn't have to go down there. He says all this stuff and it's surprising to me because my brother never believed in the paranormal or superstitions, ever since we were kids. I also realize he never answered my question about that damn door, but I let it go. After work, I get the same feeling as dread as I'm walking to my car. I don't want to stay there again. I decide, fuck it, I don't have to. So I go feed the cats, get my stuff, and drive back to my own place. I'm supposed to feed the cats one more time, so I'll stop over in the morning. As I went to sleep at my apartment, I was thinking of all the steps I would have to take to sleepwalk to that basement again. Find my car parked around the block, drive asleep to my brother's house, etc. But this time, I sleep through the night. That was night 3. Thursday morning, I stop at the house as planned. I'm about to leave when I remember that basement lights are still on. I don't even hesitate to go down there to turn them off. There was something about being there in that morning that, at the time, made it seem fine. When I go down, again, the door without a doorknob catches my eye, and it also doesn't seem very scary anymore, so what the hell? Let's see. I walk over to it and distinctly remember not feeling spooked at all, until I reached my hand towards the doorknob hole to pull it open. As soon as I did that, and I mean instantly, I feel this electric feeling like the air before a storm. And I imagine the hand coming through that hole and grabbing mine. It was like 0 to 60 going from no fear to being certain that something horrible would happen if I opened that door. It's hard to describe it other than the electric feeling. I booked it up the stairs and out of the house. So, a month later, I meet my brother for happy hour. A few drinks in, we start joking about me sleepwalking into the creepy basement. I say, he never answered me about what's behind the door, and he says, I don't want to know. Joking at first, but then insisting. Finally, he tells me, and I do not believe him. He's my big brother and has only bullshitted me about 1,000,000 times in my life. This was his explanation. The previous and first owners of the house had a teen daughter that used the basement as her bedroom. The door was her closet, where one night she curled up and took some pills and killed herself. The family was going to remodel the basement, but after tearing it apart, realizing they couldn't do it and had to move. That was why only the basement was unfinished, and why my brother was able to afford the place. The seller had to disclose a suicide happening in the residence. He said if I did not believe him to look up the market values of the identical houses on his street. He and his wife considered themselves rational people and figured it was a bargain, but they just didn't want to tell anyone. After they moved in, his wife was fine with the basement, but he grew to hate it. He apologized for not saying anything to me before I stayed there, but he never thought I'd have any reason to go down there. Now, here's what convinced me. I said, "Okay, the only thing that makes me kinda believe you is that the last morning I was there, I went over to the closet door." At this point, I see my brother's face changing. I continued. "When I went to open it, the air felt like..." At that same time, I say electricity and my brother says electric. At that same time, I saw his face and knew he was telling the truth. I've never stepped foot again in that damn basement, and I haven't sleepwalked since. Midnight Monster here. I hope you enjoyed our first story of the day. If you did, kindly subscribe to the channel as there will be plenty of videos posted daily. The next story we're going to look at involves an old creepy bridge. This story is not for the faint of heart. So, there's this old bridge in my town that supposedly is haunted by a young girl who drowned in the river beneath it. If you come at the right time, you could hear her scream. When I and my buddies were in high school, we had nothing better to do than go ghost hunting. Being from a town of 6,000 people in good old southern Illinois, half of that being prison inmates and mental health patients, you have to get a bit creative to have any sort of fun. Anyways, we get to this bridge at about 3 a.m. and we just sit there for a while. Nothing. About 20 minutes go by and we're all skeptical. Everyone's joking about how dumb this was or trying to creep each other out. All of a sudden, screaming. The most blood-curdling, high-pitched scream you've ever heard. It wasn't just one scream either, it never stopped. It kept getting even as we were driving away in our cars. But, unfortunately, that's not the worst part. One of our buddies hightailed it back to the car as soon as we heard the initial scream, because you have to walk a bit downhill to get underneath the bridge. Halfway back, we both go from sprinting to a dead stop at the same moment. I never asked him what he saw, because I saw it for myself. It was a girl running on all fours into the woods. I don't talk about this much because it gives me chills just to think about, and nobody ever takes me seriously. If you knew me in real life, I don't have the ability to lie. Just not there for me. I've always believed in ghosts because I was raised in scary movies and watching Ghost Adventures or TAPSs. In a way, this was one of the best experiences of my life. To experience something like this is unlike anything else. Just knowing that maybe there is something after we die is comforting in a way. Since the incident, I have gone back, and I'm planning on going back quite soon with people that have never been. I'll tell you more about my other experiences if there's any interest. Some strange things going on underneath that bridge. Midnight Monster here. If you guys want to hear any more stories about this bridge, there's a couple more posted from OP, so let me know in the comment section down below if that's something you guys want to see, and let's jump into the third story of the day. This only happened a couple of months ago, but it's the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. My mom and stepdad had gone on a holiday to the US for 3 months, and I was home by myself. I had a friend come over for dinner and just a general hangout, and she did not have her license yet, so I had to drive her home. It's around 11:30 p.m. when I get home, pull into the driveway as the roller door is opening. I just happened to glance out my window and this guy is standing right there. Right there as I could reach out and open my car door. I freaked out and speed into the garage so fast and start closing the roller door. While it's closing the slowest it's ever taken to close, I look in my revision mirror and this guy is walking up my driveway. He has deviated from a normal route and is walking towards my garage. The door closed just in time, I swear. I made a mad dash from my car through the connecting room into the house. The connecting room has 2 windows that don't have curtains on, and the guy's standing right the fuck there at these windows. I wasn't gonna hang around and see if he cared for a cup of tea. Lock the house up and grab my dogs and try to reason that I was just overreacting when I hear the gate to the back side of my house bang. I don't remember locking it, so any Tom, Dick, and Harry could just walk on in. Now, This is the middle of winter in Australia and it's raining and cold, so the last thing I want to do is go out there and probably get killed. So I just huddled up and pretend like nothing is happening. Probably the dumbest move in hindsight. Should have called my dad who lives 5 minutes away. I'm thinking dumbass white girl that gets her ass handed to her in a horror movie. Well, fast forward through pretty much sleepless night to be greeted with this news report. I'm not kidding you when I say this is literally down the road. This is a 2-minute walk from my house. Half an hour after all that shit went down at my house, weird shit kept happening for the next couple of nights, like the power to the lights being shut off from the breaker box. I called my dad around for that because I was not going to be that stupid. My patient died on the wing I work on. She was terminal but not expected to go immediately. She was going to a facility with hospice after a fairly long battle with cancer. She was scheduled to go early the next morning. Her husband had planned on meeting her there. Everything was set up. She was in good spirits and her assessment was fine. Took her medications and said she was going to watch the news and take a nap. An hour later, I go to check on her. I'm quietly checking her IV, making sure her stuff is in reach, moving her table, and then noticed she was gone. Sitting up, holding onto the side rail, she honestly looked like she was sleeping. No heartbeat, no respiration. Most of the time when people expire, their mouth drops open and it's very obvious. With her, nope. I had to call a coworker to confirm, and I was expecting a wake-up, but she was gone. Attempted to contact her husband, who I could not reach, and started the paperwork, in addition to attending my other patients. A few minutes later, I'm at the central desk and someone asked, "Where were you?" And I told them I was giving medication down the hall. I see 2 other nurses exchanging looks, but nurses are weird, and since they did not elaborate, I continue on my nightly duties. I'm at the very end of the hall doing some patient education, and the charged nurses come and get me. I assume the husband is calling back, but that was not the case. I've been caring for my patients at the opposite end of the ward. There have been phone calls coming out of the deceased patient's room to the central station. Several of them. No answer, just breathing. I mean, this has to be a prank, right? The phone rings. I look up to see the patient's room number on the caller ID. I walk into the room. The phone is neatly on the bedside table, TV is off, and the deceased patient looks like she's napping. I check the bathroom, it's empty. I'm going to leave the door open halfway, I say as I leave the room. No more phone calls. But the next hour, alarms go off in every room. Call lights to come on for patients that can't move. An important piece of equipment died, and the dementia patient keeps complaining about the other patient that keeps coming into her room. Loosely describing the deceased woman. Husband finally comes to the unit because he knew why I was calling. He spends a few minutes with her, and when he comes out of the room, he finds me and says, "She told me this morning she did not ever want to go to a nursing home." Well, I guess she meant it. After that, everything returned to normal. Well, normal as far as hospitals go. I used to work at a place that required to be manned 24 hours a day. The reason being is that I handled sensitive documents and files, and if somebody needed this information in the middle of the night, I would have to fetch it for them or confirm that I have it. Anyways, security is kind of tight, bars on windows, multiple locked doors to get to where I am. They would give me work to do during the night, but underestimated how quickly I could get it done. So, like most nights, I finished my work in like 30 to 45 minutes, pulled out my phone and played games, Netflix and browsed Reddit, since nobody else is in the building at night. So, now it's getting to the last third of my shift when all of a sudden I hear a door close. I look at the security camera and see someone walking down a hall towards my room. At first, I thought it was just somebody that came in, ridiculously early, so I turned around and waited for them to come on in. Nobody ever walked in. The hair started raising on my back. Now, this isn't a really big building, so I figured I'll find the guy wherever he is and start checking offices and storage rooms, but come up empty-handed. However, I do see that a fire door had shut. I go to try to rewind the cameras, but the digital recording is password protected, and I don't know the password. Anyways, The whole thing freaked me out, the way the person was walking down that hallway, like a determined walked right to where I was. So, I sit with my spine tingling for the last couple of hours of my shift, and finally people start coming in. My replacement shows up and I tell her what I saw at this point. I figured I must have just imagined the whole thing. I'm told to go home and the manager and girl who replaced me would look over the camera. After getting home, I call my manager and ask what was on that camera. So, they said the video showed the fire door closing, but the video froze for about an hour. The next thing it records is me reopening that damn door. This is not a story about ghostly figures or haunted houses or whatever. It's about living in a place for 10 years and feeling that place abruptly turn on you. Places have felt to them, the country around you has feels that you get used to. I used to live in an old southern plantation turned house farm. It was over 1,000 acres of mostly woods or pastures. One day, I was walking and exploring with my dogs down on one of the horse trails in the woods. It's about 20 minutes away from the house, and decide to randomly go off the trail. Like a 90-degree turn, climb down into a spring, then up under an ancient barbed wire fence, and wander along for a while until I found 2 large limestone caves directly across from each other. Both entrances were blocked by a bunch of rocks, hazardly stacked on each other, but they weren't entirely blocked. I wanted to go inside, but common sense told me I did not have a phone, nobody knew where the fuck I was. What if I got snake bit or I broke a leg on the rocks? So, I just looked around the caves and found this awesome as fuck old knife that looked like someone had carved it from a deer horn. As soon as I picked up the knife, it was like the woods changed. If you've ever lived out in the country for a long time in some places, you get a feel for it. My dogs got closer and clung to me. I felt distinctly unwelcome. I put down that knife, but the horrible feeling kept up until I was totally out of the woods and almost home again. I never felt comfortable alone in those woods after that. It was like one moment I'm happy and exploring, and the next I'm being watched by someone who very much hates my guts. I'm sure it could be explained as nerves or whatever, but I looked for the caves later but never found them, despite knowing exactly where I left the trail. I know that feeling of connection with that land. I used to be able to wake up, go outside, and know immediately if something was wrong. A sick horse, a loose horse, people hurting on land, etc. Nothing I can explain, just a feeling. Whatever I felt when I picked up that damn knife, it was hostile. That's probably my most unexplained experience ever. I had other weird things happen, but these 2 instances come to my mind first. One night 2 summers ago, I wake up around 2 a.m. and was just about to fall asleep again, but didn't when I saw my brother standing in the doorway of my room. My door was wide open. He ran towards me at a very high speed and stopped with his face like a foot away from mine. I swatted my arm at his figure and he slowly disappeared right in front of me. It was probably my eyes playing tricks on me, but it was still creepy. Last winter, I was going to my mom's house to say goodnight. I was helping her clean up after her house earlier that day because she was going to move. I was at her house, then left to run a couple errands, and then returned to say goodnight before heading home. I get to her house, walk inside, thinking she was asleep on the couch in the living room. She wasn't there, so I decided to go upstairs because maybe she was sleeping up there. Nowhere to be found. I was a little weirded out, but then thought she was in the kitchen or the bathroom. I went back downstairs to check things out, and when I couldn't find her, I realized that I was in the house alone. Let me tell you, this house is over 100 years old, and there have been very creepy things that happened in there that I just cannot explain. Hence why I was scared in the first place. Man, I was freaking out. I called for my mom to make sure that she wasn't there and heard a weird cough or choke in the basement. I froze, checked my phone, and got a message from my mom's friend saying that my mom was over with her. I then noped the fuck out of the house and called my boyfriend so I could distract myself while I made sure that all the doors were locked. I was talking to my boyfriend while I walked around the perimeter. The back door was locked. The front door was locked. The basement, locked. When I was on the side of the house by one of our windows, something from inside the house slammed against the window, and I mean hard. It was such a loud sound that you'd think the window would have broken, but it did not. I probably killed my boyfriend's eardrum with how loud I screamed. I hopped in my truck and got the fuck out of there. No one else was in the house with me, so I can't logically explain what happened. Let's just say that I'm glad that we are not associated with that home anymore. I hope whoever owns it now sees it as a happier place than my family and I ever will. My friends and I time traveled, or that's the easiest explanation. We were in high school and he was taking my bus back to my house with me. We get home around 2:45 and my mother gets home around 3. We decided to go hiking before my mother could say no, so we left a note on the counter and took off. We took our usual route back to the backyard hill, making sure to avoid the crazy people that resided in the makeshift home up there. Climbed some trees for a while, explored a section of the car graveyard we haven't checked out before, and other typical teenager exploring type stuff. We took a break near the top of the mountain. It was unusually beautiful that day. Incredibly green, and there were seriously visible light beams shining down through the canopy. Like some serious pretty stuff. So of course I started running around the light and decided we should probably start getting back, because my mother was probably going to be pissed if I missed dinner. On the way back, we stumbled onto a pond which we've never encountered before. It was small and I had a single wooden boat in it. There was also a few teepees around the pond. Not old teepees, they looked ratty and unusual. We decided someone was probably just living out there and took a new path back home. We climbed down and up an old quarry and dropped off the main road that leads to my house. We were filthy and over a mile from my place. We just walked the road back to my home. We arrived home before my mother, which seemed strange, so I threw out that note I wrote her so she wouldn't know we were out gallivanting. She got home like 3 minutes later, wondering how we got so dirty at school. She arrived home at her usual time, and we've only been gone a total of 15 minutes. We honestly don't even talk about that day anymore. It's too confusing. But yeah, time travel. My friend, let's call him Jake, from time to time would tell us about how he'd often hear his home phone ringing early in the morning, always around 5 a.m., and how it would wake him up, only to ring for about 4 or so times before it would stop. He said it freaked him out because he could not imagine who would be calling at that time and why they would suddenly just stop. Also, how it pissed him off that he was just then awake. I'd assure him it was probably some automated scam call trying to sell some crap or something. A couple of weeks would go by, then Jake would tell me again about the phone ringing early in the morning. He made it clear that it couldn't be his mom or dad because they were in bed. Fair enough. A relevant point to Jake's story is that he had a disabled younger brother. Let's call him Dale. When I'd come around to hang out, Dale would always be with us and he was great. He just wasn't able to communicate with you. He just kind of made noises. We'd throw something on the TV, hang out and eat cereal and something. Anyways, about the 6th time Jake complained to me about this phone thing, he said he managed to pick it up this time. I remember what he said. It's just a constant buzzing sound. I picked it up, held my breath and listened. Sounded like TV static or something. This kind of confirmed our suspicion that it was an automated call. I said if he'd listen any longer, it would probably have kicked him into a voice trying to get you to throw your card details, and it would have blurred it out. He put it down though, apparently. The next day, he said it happened again, but before he picked it up, it already stopped ringing. He picked it up anyways, hoping to get the caller's number, and realized the call was still alive. Same buzzing noise, but he heard something else on the line, shuffling around and breathing. Jake said he pretty much shit himself, proceeded to hold his breath again and just listen. Said he'd never been more freaked out in his life. Said he listened for a good 15 minutes and came to realize that it must be Dale that had picked up the phone before him and was kinda talking to the buzzing noise. The buzzing would sound out for about 30 seconds or so, and then Dale would make the most intelligible, if that's the right word, sound he'd heard Dale make, almost as if he was responding coherently. After Dale would do this, Jake said the buzzer stopped for a few seconds or so, then would sound off for about 30 seconds, repeating the process. This went on for about 15 minutes before Jake said he went into Dale's room and put the phone down. We think Dale must have been picked up on the phone doing this every time Jake heard it ring. Jake's never heard Dale sound so coherent before, and hasn't since. The phone calls have stopped for now. Okay guys, Midnight Monster here. That was 9 of the most unexplained and creepy stories that people have shared. If you want your own stories shared on this channel, or you just want to share your story, post it in the comment section down below, and you might even be the one that's pinned for the video.